Controversial topics like BLM, Black Lives Matter, critical race theory, and black queer studies have been pulled from the College Board's AP African American Studies course. This all coming after backlash from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and one Florida Democrat. Listen.
Well, frankly, I'm against the College Board's curriculum. I think it's trash. It's not African American history. It is ideology. The struggle for freedom, equality, and justice has not been no tension with queerness.
That Florida Democrat, Bill Proctor, joins us now. Mr. Proctor, a pleasure to have you on the program. Why did you speak out?
Well, it was time when you have something, an injustice of information that would be shared with Florida school children to protect their minds and to make sure that they were getting profitable information that could sustain them through their lives was very important. And I just believe that there are a number of voices emanating, but the truth of the matter is that the College Board's recommendation and curriculum was not prime time ready.
As a professor of African American history, really nobody's going to know this subject as well as you. Why do you think that the AP African Studies course from the College Board strayed so wildly and so divergently from what you have taught for years?
It's amazing that they were that far off course and outside of the traditional bounds of a John Hope Franklin, the standard text that was used at our university and among others, from slavery to freedom. The book before the Mayflower, Lerone Bennett, was not in use, or the works of Ivan Van Sertima and other authors of note. It's just unfathomable as to why they would be so far away from the norm.
What's been the reaction to your taking a stand?
Well, a number of people believe that I am endorsing Governor DeSantis, or I'm backing Governor DeSantis. I view it just the opposite. Governor DeSantis is standing up for me. Governor DeSantis recognizes this curricula does not talk about freedom. And from 1619 to 1865, the quest of Africans in America during this month of African American history has been about freedom. It does not talk about the law, the Constitution. You cannot talk about the role of the law, the Constitution, Article 1, the 13th Amendment, 14th, 15th Amendment, all of those things about. And then, of course, how can you talk about African American history and there's no reference to economics? And for 246 years, Africans here in America have been the instruments of economics and selling people, moving people about. That's a family issue. The contributions, and even the governor pointed out that the biographies of noteworthy African Americans over the years were missing. So when you're teaching a subject matter that does not talk about the fundamentals, about freedom, about the law, about the economics of the situation, the religion, the family matters, as well as the contributions in many areas, is missing something terribly bad.
Well, what you did worked, because the College Board updated the curriculum on Wednesday and said, quote, the course focuses on the topics where professors shared a strong consensus on the essential events, experiences, and individuals crucial to a study of African American history and culture. I said what you did worked. Are you confident that this has gone far enough and that they have reformed the curriculum properly to reflect what should be taught based upon your years of experience in this field?
No, I think that what they've gone to, they've gone to patching. This is a patch up. And we need to move from patching to scratch. Let's go from patch to scratch. And on yesterday, I asked Governor DeSantis in a letter to him if he would appoint a 15-member panel of scholars within the state of Florida to come up with a real meaningful curricula. It saddens me, it hurts me that the College Board does not come under the auspices of the U.S. Department of Education, now the Florida Department of Education. They're not accountable. They're a private organization, supposedly, presumably for nonprofit. However, they account and report to thousands of universities, and they stand as the gatekeepers between children all across America. And their role has been to assess the aptitude and what young people might have in terms of having college abilities to matriculate. And I believe that in this instance, This board has not had the expertise of African-American historians. It's amazing how they have flip-flopped, done an about-face. They have capitulated to a number of concerns raised by the DeSantis administration. And it's just really, really, it seems to me that Florida is a big contract. It's the third largest state, and that they capitulated, turned around, put their tails between their legs.
Right.
And I guess they did not want to awaken other states. When you have a governor that takes on Disney, I think the College Board
That's a great point.
We better get our stuff right. You know, this is a contract for them.
Yeah, understood. I certainly hope Governor DeSantis takes you up on that idea of forming a commission. And, sir, you should be front and center, if not leading that commission, because nobody knows this stuff quite like you. I'm going to call you Professor Bill Proctor, because that's what you are, Commissioner as well. Thank you so much for your time and insight this morning, sir. We appreciate it.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.